What would you do if your husband's dying words revealed a betrayal so deep it literally killed you? Picture this, you're standing beside the hospital bed of the man you've loved for 25 years. His breathing is labored, his grip on your hand weak, but his eyes are clear as he whispers his final wishes. "Half my assets to our son Michael," he rasps, "and half to Victoria. But here's the thing, my name is Rachel." I stood there, frozen, as our son simply nodded like this made perfect sense. "She's been there for you all these years, Dad. She deserves it." My husband's eyes found mine one last time. "Don't worry," he whispered with what I can only describe as a cruel smile, "when your time comes, you can be buried next to me." The room spun. My heart literally stopped beating from the shock. I collapsed right there at his deathbed, killed by the revelation that the woman I thought was just his business partner had been his mistress all along. But death wasn't the end of my story, it was the beginning. Before I continue, drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from. I love connecting with viewers from around the world, and your location might just make it into my next story. When I opened my eyes, I wasn't in heaven or hell. I was back in my own living room, 22 years younger, staring at the familiar crack in the ceiling I'd always meant to fix. Across from me sat James, that was my husband's name, his face wearing that expression of disappointed authority I knew so well. "Rachel, we need to talk about Michael," he said, his voice carrying that tone that meant the decision had already been made. The teacher called again. "He's having behavioral issues at school, and frankly, this house is chaos. You need to quit your job and focus on being a mother." I recognized this moment with crystal clarity. This was the day that changed everything, the day I gave up my career as a rising marketing executive to become a full-time housewife and mother. The day James manipulated me into sacrificing my independence so he could build his empire on my unpaid labor. In my first life, I had believed his sweet promises about providing for our family, about how temporary this arrangement would be. I had trusted that our marriage was built on love, not calculation. I had been so terribly, heartbreakingly wrong. This time, I knew better. I knew that Victoria Morrison, the business consultant, who James claimed was helping him expand his consulting firm, was actually the love of his life. I knew that while I spent the next 2 decades raising our son Michael, caring for James's aging parents, and managing every crisis alone, he was building a secret life with her. Victoria wasn't just some random woman, she was James's college sweetheart, the one who got away. When her husband died 5 years into our marriage, James had swooped in to help her relocate closer to our city. What followed was a decades-long affair that I had been too trusting, too exhausted, too devoted to see. In my previous life, I had noticed the late nights, the business trips that seemed to multiply, the way he lit up when her name was mentioned. But I had explained it all away. James was ambitious, dedicated, building something important. Victoria was a grieving widow who needed support. I was the understanding wife who held everything together at home. What a fool I had been. Standing in that living room, 22 years in the past, I felt something I had never experienced before, rage. Pure, crystalline fury that burned away the fog of confusion and self-doubt that had clouded my judgment for so long. "No," I said simply. James blinked, clearly not having heard me correctly. "What?" I said. "No. Michael is your son too. If there's a problem at school, we both need to address it. I'm not quitting my job." For the first time in our marriage, I saw James truly speechless. His mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. When he finally found his voice, it came out as a sputter of indignation. "Rachel, I'm the man of this house. I provide for this family. Your job is to support me and raise our son. That's how marriage works." "Then maybe," I said, my voice steady despite the earthquake happening in my chest, "you should be the one to quit. After all, your parents are getting older. They need someone around. And frankly, I make more money than you do. That last part was true. While James was still building his client base, I was already a senior account manager with a clear path to partnership. In my first life, I had thrown all of that away. This time, I had no intention of making the same mistake. What followed was 3 weeks of the coldest war our house had ever seen. James tried every manipulation tactic in his arsenal: guilt about Michael's needs, promises about our future, subtle threats about what would happen if I didn't fall in line. But I held firm. Finally, we reached what he thought was a compromise. We would both compete for the same promotion I was already in line for at my marketing firm. Whoever got it would continue working. The other would stay home. James was smugly confident about this arrangement. He had no idea that I already knew about his relationship with Victoria, or that she had been feeding him inside information about my projects for months. He thought he was playing chess while I was playing checkers. He had no idea I was playing an entirely different game. While James plotted with Victoria to undermine my career, I was quietly documenting their affair. In 1995, this meant patience and old-fashioned detective work. I installed a tape recorder in James's home office. I followed him to their business meetings at romantic restaurants. I photographed them leaving the apartment he'd rented for her across town, the apartment I was supposedly paying for through our joint finances. The evidence was overwhelming, but I needed the perfect moment to use it. That moment came sooner than expected. 3 days before the promotion announcement, someone at my office started spreading rumors about me having an inappropriate relationship with my boss, David Chen. The whispers were vicious and specific, too specific to be random gossip. Someone with inside knowledge was trying to destroy my reputation. I knew exactly who that someone was. I waited until James and Victoria thought they had won. The morning of the promotion announcement, I walked into the office with a small briefcase and a calm smile. The rumors had done their work. I could see the sideways glances, hear the whispered conversations that stopped when I entered a room. James was already there, accepting congratulations from colleagues who assumed he'd gotten the promotion. Victoria stood beside him, her hand possessively on his arm, both of them practically glowing with triumph. Before we announced the promotion, I said loudly enough for the entire office to hear, "I think there's something everyone should know about the kind of man we're considering for leadership." I opened the briefcase and pulled out photographs, bank statements, and the tape recorder. James Morrison has been conducting an extramarital affair with Victoria Chen for over 5 years. He's been using company resources and embezzled funds from our joint accounts to maintain a secret apartment for his mistress. The silence that followed was deafening. James's face went through a spectrum of colors: white, red, purple. Victoria looked like she might faint. Furthermore, I continued, pressing play on the tape recorder, they've been working together to sabotage my career through a campaign of false rumors and stolen proprietary information. The recording was damning. James and Victoria's voices filled the conference room, discussing their plans to discredit me, their hope that I would finally give up and go home where I belonged, and worst of all, their laughter at how pathetically trusting I was. The aftermath was swift and brutal. James was fired immediately. Victoria, who had been working as an independent contractor, found her services were no longer needed by any reputable firm in the city. Word travels fast in professional circles. I got the promotion, along with a generous settlement from the company to avoid any potential lawsuits. More importantly, I filed for divorce that same afternoon, armed with enough evidence to ensure I got primary custody of Michael and the majority of our assets. James tried to fight it, of course. He hired lawyers, made threats, attempted to turn Michael against me. But the evidence was overwhelming, and more importantly, I was no longer the naive woman who would quietly accept his manipulation. The divorce was finalized within 6 months. James moved in with Victoria, but their relationship crumbled quickly once they were no longer bonding over the thrill of deception. Turns out, when you remove the secrecy and excitement, what they had wasn't love, it was just mutual selfishness. Michael, who was 12 at the time, struggled with the divorce initially. But children are remarkably adaptable, and he thrived in an environment where he wasn't constantly witnessing his father's subtle emotional abuse of his mother. Without the stress of managing James's ego and Victoria's schemes, I had more energy to devote to actually parenting my son. My career flourished in ways I had never imagined possible. Within 3 years, I was promoted to regional director. 5 years later, I started my own marketing consultancy. By the time I reached the age when I had died in my first life, I was running a multi-million-dollar company with offices in 4 states. James's story didn't end well. Without Victoria's insider information and my unpaid labor supporting his ambitions, his consulting business failed within 2 years. He bounced between dead-end jobs, always convinced that his next opportunity would restore him to his rightful place in the world. Victoria eventually moved back to her hometown, where she worked as a secretary until retirement. They stayed in touch sporadically, but the grand romance they thought they were protecting never materialized into anything meaningful. Michael grew up to be a successful architect with a healthy understanding of relationships built on mutual respect rather than manipulation. He married a wonderful woman named Jennifer, and they have 2 children who call me Grandma Rachel and genuinely light up when I visit. As for me, I never remarried, though I had several meaningful relationships over the years. I learned that being alone is vastly preferable to being with someone who sees you as an obstacle to their happiness rather than a partner in creating it. Looking back, I realized that my first life wasn't a tragedy, it was an education. I had to experience the full cost of surrendering my power to someone else before I could understand the true value of keeping it. James was never the problem, not really. The problem was that I had been taught to believe that love meant sacrifice, that being a good wife meant making myself smaller so my husband could feel bigger, that my dreams were less important than his comfort. The problem was that I had confused selflessness with self-destruction, devotion with servitude, loyalty with enabling. When I got my second chance, I didn't just change my actions, I changed my fundamental understanding of what I deserved. I learned that true love doesn't require you to give up who you are. It celebrates who you are and supports you in becoming even more. I learned that the person who will fight hardest for your dreams should be you. I learned that when someone shows you who they are through their actions, you should believe them the first time. Most importantly, I learned that no relationship, no matter how long, no matter how comfortable, no matter how socially expected, is worth betraying yourself. The changes I made didn't just affect my life, they created ripples that touched everyone around me. Michael grew up seeing a mother who valued herself, which taught him to value himself and others. My parents, who in my first life had worried constantly about my obvious unhappiness, got to enjoy years of watching their daughter thrive. My colleagues and employees benefited from working with someone who led from authenticity rather than desperation. Even James, in his way, was better off. Forced to confront the consequences of his choices without someone to blame or manipulate, he eventually had to develop some actual coping skills. He never became a particularly admirable person, but he did stop being an actively destructive one. The Victoria of this timeline also faced the reality of her choices much earlier. Without the fantasy of being the other woman to sustain her, she had to build a real life based on her own merits rather than her ability to steal someone else's husband. Today, I'm 73 years old, and I wake up every morning in a house I bought with money I earned myself. I have a son who respects me, friends who value me, and a business legacy I'm proud of. I travel when I want to, eat what I like, and go to bed each night knowing that every choice I made that day was truly my own. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I hadn't gotten that second chance, if I hadn't died from the shock of learning the truth about my marriage. Would I have eventually figured it out on my own? Would I have found the courage to leave? I'll never know, and it doesn't matter. What matters is that when the universe gave me a do-over, I didn't waste it trying to make the same broken relationship work. I used it to build something entirely new and entirely mine. The saddest part of my story isn't that James betrayed me. It's that in my first life, I betrayed myself every single day for 25 years, and I called it love. The happiest part is that I got the chance to choose differently. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life stories about second chances, standing up for yourself, and finding your way back to your own power. Drop a comment below and tell me, have you ever had a moment where you realized you needed to choose yourself over someone else's comfort? Have you ever gotten a second chance to rewrite your story? I read every single comment, and your experiences might inspire my next video. And if you have a story of your own that you'd like to share, whether it's about betrayal, redemption, standing up for yourself, or any other life-changing moment, send it my way. I love featuring real stories from real people, and yours could be the next one to inspire thousands of viewers around the world. Remember, you deserve to be the main character in your own life story. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise. Until next time, keep choosing yourself.